Jimmy Carter, at a forum after Donald Trump gets elected, makes this crack.
And there's no doubt that the Russians did interfere in the election. And I think the interference, although not yet quantified, if fully investigated, would show that Trump didn't actually win the election in 2016. He lost the election, and he was put into office because the Russians interfered on his behalf.
That alone should disqualify people from talking about what a wonderful ex-president he is. But of course, he said that about Donald Trump, and so much of the country, most of the media couldn't give a rip. In fact, they agreed with him. What did Jay Johnson say again? Obama's DHS secretary? While the Russians tried, they failed to change a single vote tally, not one. And as far as the interference is concerned, yes, Russians interfered. But as to whether or not it affected public opinion, I have no idea, said Jay Johnson. I'd have to have a world where there was Russian interference and one where there wasn't. Compare the two. Since I can't, I don't know. But there was a study done by the Stern School of Management, NYU, and they found that the Russian interference, if anything, had a negligible, barely measurable effect on public opinion. Yet, according to Gallup, nearly 78% of Democrats believe the Russian interference altered public opinion, and 2/3, 66% of Democrats, according to a YouGov poll, believe the Russians actually changed vote tallies in order to elect Donald Trump. Thank you, Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter also, when he ran, said that Americans need to get over their inordinate fear of communism, and he kissed Leonid Brezhnev, the then Soviet premier, on the cheek. Not long after that, Leonid Brezhnev invaded Afghanistan. And Jimmy Carter said, I'm so shocked. I'm shocked that I misread Leonid Brezhnev. Jimmy Carter also pressured the Shah into releasing what Jimmy Carter called political prisoners. Today we call them terrorists. He pressured the Shah into releasing more and more and more, and ultimately they brought down the Shah and then seized American hostages and held them for 444 days. It wasn't until moments before Ronald Reagan was about ready to take over that they were released. Thank you, Jimmy Carter. In his post-presidency, he wrote a book in which he referred to Israel as an apartheid state. A couple of weeks ago, we played you excerpt from that debate at Harvard Union over whether or not Israel was an apartheid state. And the person that took the position that Israel was not an apartheid state was an Arab Palestinian Israeli living in Israel, who said that anybody who knows anything at all about Israel would never in a million years refer to it as an apartheid state. People that have never been there know nothing about it. And Jimmy Carter wrote a book and had that in its title. Now, there's a piece in the National Review called Jimmy Carter Was a Terrible President and an Even Worse Former President. Starts out by saying the popular narrative is that he was unlucky, but he excelled during his very long post-presidential career. Quote, the reality is that he was a terrible president, but an even worse former president. It continues, Carter's true legacy is one of economic misery at home and embarrassment on the world stage. He left the country in its weakest position of the post-World War II era, spent the rest of his life meddling in U.S. foreign policy and working against the United States and its allies in a manner that could be fairly described as treasonous. That's a quote. His obsessive hatred of Israel, his pompous belief that only he could forge Middle East peace, led him to befriend terrorists and lash out at American Jews who criticized him. End of quote. Then it talks a little bit about his economic record. Quote, when he took the presidential oath in January 1977, the unemployment rate was a high 7.5%. When he left office January 1981, it was just as high. Inflation was 5.7% in 1976, the year he was elected, went up in each of his years in office, and reached a staggering 13.5% in 1980, his last year. The only post-World War II period in which inflation was higher was 1947. Klein writes, quote, "Put another way, to maintain the buying power that $100 had the month Jimmy Carter was sworn into office, you'd need $150 by the time he left." Under Carter, gas prices doubled. Supply became so scarce that Americans had to endure long lines at stations to fill up their tanks. Some people are old enough to remember that. Quote, "On the international stage, Carter showed weakness and America's enemies took notice." By the way, let me digress here for a second. In his post-presidential years, there was conflict between us and North Korea. We were concerned about North Korea getting a nuke. So Carter decides to go to North Korea. Bill Clinton reluctantly signed on to it because he couldn't do anything about it. And Carter proceeded to negotiate a deal where Carter claimed that the North Korean dictator had decided to no longer pursue his nuclear weapons program. Bill Clinton gave a press conference and then announced, "Great news! North Korea has abandoned its nuclear program, thanks to the diplomacy of former President Jimmy Carter." And when Carter left the room, the dictator of North Korea doubled over in laughter and continued the program, a program that they have to this day. Thank you, Jimmy Carter. Thanks for watching these clips from The Larry Elder Show. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a moment. More thought-provoking discussions are just a click away, so stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next one.